In this video, I will show you how to work in hexagon stitch. And this is a really interesting textured stitch, which is perfect for warm winter knits. And we use it in our Kiss Me Quick jumper. So today we're using our Wool Me Tender yarn, and this colour is Sand Trooper Beige, along with a pair of our 6.5mm rosewood knitting needles. So let's get started. Hexagon stitch is made up of 4 rows which are alternated. So all you need to do is just keep repeating these 4 pattern rows to keep working the pattern. And here we're working over an uneven number of stitches. And so I've cast on using the long tail technique and knit 1 row, and I'm working over 15 stitches. So let's start with pattern row 1. So you need to begin by knitting your first stitch. And now to work your second stitch, instead of knitting the stitch as normal, you're going to work into the stitch below. So you can see how there's this bar here which sits directly beneath the stitch on your left needle. You're going to go in there. So wrap your yarn around and complete as a normal knit stitch. And it might feel like something's going to unravel, but I promise you it's completely fine. And that's how you start forming the hexagon stitch pattern. So you just need to keep repeating those 2 steps of knitting 1 stitch normally and then knitting 1 stitch into the row below. So let's see what that looks like. So knit 1 stitch normally, knit 1 stitch into the row below. Knit 1 stitch normally, and then knit 1 stitch into the row below. So just keep on repeating those 2 steps until you get to the end of your row, until you have 1 stitch left, and you're going to knit that stitch. So knit a stitch normally, knit into the row below, knit 1 stitch normally, knit into the row below, until you're left with 1 stitch, and then you're going to knit that stitch. So that's what your piece will look like once you've worked 1 pattern row. It doesn't really look like much at the moment, but as you progress through the pattern rows, you'll see the hexagon stitch pattern beginning to form. So that was row 1. Now let's work row 2. So with row 2, you're going to knit your first stitch as normal. And now, because you knitted into the row below in the previous row, you've now got this diagonal strand which is sitting over your next stitch. So what you want to do is insert the tip of your right needle through that strand so that that strand is now sat on your right needle. And then next, you're going to insert your right needle into the next stitch and slip it off. And now to complete this stitch, insert your left needle through both the slipped stitch and the strand, like so. Wrap your yarn around and complete as a normal knit stitch. So you're going to repeat those 2 steps right across your row until you have 1 stitch left, and then you're going to knit that stitch. So let's see that again. Knit the next stitch as normal, pick up that diagonal strand, slip the next stitch, insert your left needle through both, wrap the yarn around and complete as a normal knit stitch. Knit the next stitch, pick up that bar, slip the next stitch, and then knit the 2 together. So just keep on repeating those steps until you have 1 stitch left of your row. So knit that stitch, pick up that bar, slip the stitch, and then knit both that strand and the slip stitch together. And now you've got 1 stitch left, so you're going to knit that last stitch. So that's what your piece will look like once you've worked pattern row 2. So now let's see what pattern row 3 looks like. So to begin pattern row 3, rather than knitting the stitch which is on your left needle, you're going to knit the stitch below. And just complete as a normal knit stitch. Then to work the following stitch, you're just going to knit it normally, like so. And you're just going to keep repeating those 2 steps over and over again until you have 1 stitch left of your row. So insert your needle into the stitch in the row below and complete as a normal knit stitch. Then knit the next stitch into the row below, then work a normal knit stitch. So just keep on repeating those steps right to the end of your row. And when you've got 1 stitch left, you're just going to knit into the row below and work a normal knit stitch into that stitch, like so. So after working pattern row 3, you can see that you're beginning to see a pattern to start to form. So let's work pattern row 4 to complete the complete sequence. So to begin pattern row 4, what you're going to do is find that diagonal strand of yarn which is sat over the first stitch. So it's here. And then you're going to slip that stitch, insert the tip of your left needle through both of those loops and complete as a normal knit stitch. Then you're going to work a normal knit stitch and you're just going to repeat those 2 steps over and over again until you have 1 stitch left of your row. So find that diagonal strand and pick it up, slip the next stitch, insert your left needle and then knit those together. Work a normal knit stitch, find that strand, slip, knit the 2 together. And just keep repeating that sequence over and over until you've got 1 stitch left of your row. So as you can see, it's a fairly easy technique, and even though it's over 4 pattern rows, it doesn't take much to memorise the sequence, as it is just based on a garter stitch, alternating in knitting into the row below. So when you've got 1 stitch left of your row, find that diagonal strand, slip the next stitch and then knit those 2 together. So that's what your piece will look like after working your 4 pattern rows. And if you keep on repeating those 4 pattern rows, then eventually you'll end up with something that looks like this, with a really interesting and defined texture.